Sam recently graduated from school and was contemplating on whether he should seek part-time work or just wait out and enjoy the rest of his freedom. In 6 months, Sam would begin his obligatory service to the nation for the next 2 years and would only come home for the weekends. Weeks went by as Sam procrastinated on his decision and spent his days either playing his guitar or watching TV. Happiness turned into contentment, and after 4 months, contentment eventually turned into boredom. Okay, what shall I do now? I want to work, but who's going to hire a 19-year-old who can only work for 2 months before he enlists for national service? Said Sam to himself as he lazed in bed. Loneliness slowly crept up on Sam's boredom. Not having that many friends didn't help either. And the few friends he did have were either working part-time or have already enlisted for national service. With no siblings and both parents working full-time, he was mostly home alone with his cat. Sam had no one to hang out with and was eventually drowned in loneliness. One night, at around 1 a.m., as Sam was about to fall asleep, he suddenly felt his chest caving in and found himself taking half-breaths in. Soon, Sam realized that he was beginning to have trouble breathing. "Oh man, the air feels so still that it's so hard to breathe," said Sam to himself, thinking that it was the weather that was causing it. This was despite having the air conditioner turned on. He thought to himself, maybe there's something wrong with the AC. Sam turned off the air conditioner and opened his room window wide open. Putting his face close to the window grill, Sam took a deep breath and stood there for a couple of seconds to see if it would help. Unfortunately, he still had problems breathing and stood there confused. Sam thought that maybe he was having gastric problems again that's making it difficult for him to breathe. Sam went to the kitchen to grab a warm glass of water, which usually worked after he burped a couple of times. As Sam sat in the kitchen sipping his warm cup of water, he began feeling better. Sam then walked back to his room and laid back in bed. Strangely, however, Sam began feeling it again. This time, Sam started to panic as his breathing problems got worse. Untypical of Sam, he knew he had no other choice but to seek help from his parents. He knocked on his parents' room and told them that he could hardly breathe. His parents got out of bed, noticed Sam gasping for air, and decided to rush Sam to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctor kept Sam under overnight observation to find out the cause of Sam's condition, while Sam slowly recovered. The next morning, as Sam waited in the doctor's office with his mom, the doctor entered the room and sat in front of them. "Hi, ma'am. We have checked Sam's test results, and turns out there is nothing wrong with Sam. He is completely healthy," explained the doctor to Sam's mom. "But why did I suddenly feel like I could no longer breathe? I have never felt this way," Sam asked. "We are not quite sure what exactly caused it, but try to get some rest and come to us immediately if you have trouble breathing again," said the doctor. Disappointed that there wasn't any concrete explanation for what had happened, Sam and his mom went home. It was the following night, and Sam had the same problem again. Once again, he knocked on his parents' room, suspecting that it might be air in Sam's room that was causing this. Sam's mom said, "Okay, you know what? How about you sleep in the guest room for tonight? There might be something wrong with the air in your room." "You might be right, Mom. When I was in the kitchen, I was fine. When I went into your room last night before we went to the hospital, I was fine too," said Sam. "Okay then. Just sleep there for tonight, and tomorrow we'll try to go to the doctor's clinic nearby to get a second opinion," said Sam's mom. Sam's breathing slowly went back to normal as he sat in the other room, calmed himself down by watching TV, and eventually falling asleep. At the nearby clinic the following day, a different doctor this time did a thorough health checkup for Sam. "All right, ma'am. We have done the test, and all is good with Sam's health. There's nothing wrong with Sam, but just in case, we're going to give him an asthma inhaler," So, in case he has trouble breathing again, spray it a couple of times into Sam's mouth to see if it works," said the doctor. Sam and his mom acknowledged, but again, they were still not satisfied with the findings, as it didn't make sense as to what was going on with Sam. That same afternoon, in his room, Sam began feeling his chest caving in again and was gasping for air. Recalling what the clinic doctor had said earlier, Sam reached out for his asthma inhaler and did what was told. Unfortunately, it didn't have any effect. Not knowing what else to do, Sam called out to his mom again. "Mom, maybe there's something more than just a medical problem. Maybe a spiritual healer can help. Can we try that?" asked Sam while trying to catch his breath. "All right, the doctors aren't any help, so we might as well try," said Sam's mom while looking at Sam, concerned with his condition. Strangely enough, the moment Sam discussed about having a spiritual healer come over, Sam's breathing gradually got better. He felt his chest caving out again and able to take full breaths in. That same evening, in his small, hunchback stature, a friendly-looking man entered Sam's home. It was a distant family friend that they've barely spoken to. "How are you feeling now, Sam?" asked the man named Mr. Clapson. "I'm okay, I guess. I haven't had any breathing issues since we contacted you earlier in the afternoon, but I'm worried that it would come again, like it always does," said Sam. "Very well," said Mr. Clapson as his eyes scanned across the living room. "Do you know if there might be anything spiritually wrong that's causing this?" asked Sam's dad, hoping to finally get an answer to Sam's condition. "I figured out the problem, even before I came over. It followed me back to your home and sized me up from head to toe," said Mr. Clapson. Goosebumps ran through Sam and his parents' skins after hearing that. They knew what Mr. Clapson meant. "Well, I shall get to it now. I'll explain everything later," shared Mr. Clapson. With confidence, Mr. Clapson headed straight to Sam's room and began speaking to someone as though there was somebody in the room. Sam and his parents sat outside in the living room, slightly afraid with what was going on. As they sat quietly in the living room, they were shocked out of their seats when they suddenly heard, "Leave now!" shouted Mr. Clapson from inside Sam's room, as he followed up in a projected voice with a set of prayers. Mr. Clapson then walked out of the room with his eyes shut. He then walked over to a corner of the living room opposite to the main door and continued with his prayers. His head suddenly turned swiftly to the right while his eyes were still closed, seemingly watching someone run across the living room and out the main door. Mr. Clapson then went to the main door and voiced a final prayer. Sam and his parents stood in the middle of the living room, anxious to know what was happening. As Mr. Clapson seemed to have completed his session, he slowly opened his eyes and walked towards Sam and his parents. They sat down as Mr. Clapson began explaining to them what had happened. "Sam, as you suspected, there was definitely something here. A large, furry-looking spirit, as tall as the ceiling, has been living in your room for the past few months. He didn't want to leave after I told him to. He ran around your room and then sat in a corner of the living room. I said, 'Leave or else.'" "Why? How did it get here?" stuttered Sam. "It was from your school, Sam. You left the editing room in your school months ago during sunset. During the sunset period is the time where many spirits roam and are highly active. It followed you all the way home, and that evening, you didn't wash your feet nor have a shower before falling asleep in your room, did you?" asked Mr. Clapson ever so calmly. How did you know? I never wash my feet when I reach home. nor do I take a shower. And why now, if it has been here for months? Replied Sam, still in a state of shock. Have you been feeling a little sad lately? You see, it knows if you're sad. So all it did was it gave you a hug. That's why you feel your chest caving in, said Mr. Clapson. Still quite freaked out by the whole situation, Sam's curiosity still drove strong. But why me? Although there weren't many of us left in school, it could have followed someone else. So, why me? Asked Sam. Because it likes you. These spirits are attracted to those who are more emotionally sensitive, said Mr. Clapson nonchalantly. So from now on, I hope that once you reach home, especially in the early evening, immediately go to your kitchen's washroom and wash your feet before heading to your room. It'll be even better if you could immediately take a shower. So, even if you're followed home, you have cleansed yourself in the washroom and it stays there, said Mr. Clapson. Everything makes sense now. How my cat always stared in one corner of the room's ceiling late at night and quickly turned her head as though following someone moving quickly across the room, or how the stationary bicycle's paddle would suddenly swing at night, said Sam. From then on, Sam no longer had problems breathing. Sam never missed an evening shower either after being out for the day. Now that Sam is safe and breathing well again, what do you think? By any chance, was it a medical or a mental problem, as he, Sam, felt lonely and empty? Or was Sam really a spirit's love at first sight?